The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies is calling for urgent funding to support the SABC's public service mandate ahead of the 2026 local government elections. The public broadcaster says it needs an estimated 120 million rand to deliver comprehensive election coverage. Let's pick up the conversation talking about the SABC's readiness for elections 2026, as well as the whole issues around its funding and the funding model. We are joined by the ANC Caucus Whip in the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies, MP Imraan Subrathie. Good evening to you and thank you for your time. So, having heard directly from the SABC and also with the backdrop of understanding what is required in an election year in terms of the mandate of the SABC, but also the commitments that are more structured and more legislative. What's your abiding sense of what it will take for the SABC to play the role that it's supposed to play in advancing electoral democracy?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to engage with yourself and with South Africans through this platform. Let me begin to say that, the SABC, as you rightly pointed out, is not an ordinary broadcaster. Its legislative and its regulatory obligations under both the Broadcasting Act and the ICASA license conditions requires it to deliver a wide range of public interest programming. It is obliged to inform South Africans, to educate the whole population in every official language across the country, including audiences that no ordinarily commercial broadcaster would service. Now, I think an important point to note here in the results of last year, 2025, the SABC, which has a public mandate to fulfill, 55% of that mandate cost was covered by government, which left an unfunded mandate of 45%. Now, this unfunded mandate of 45%, the SABC tries to recover through license fees registrations, which has about an 85% delinquency, and therefore it uses a lot of commercial funding. Now, why the context is important, against this background of an SABC, and maybe it's very useful to point out, and the valiant efforts of the teams of SABC, despite these very difficult circumstances, our public broadcaster continues to fulfill its mandate and keep South Africans informed. Now, against that very difficult, constrained circumstances, now we have an election in 2026. Now, the election is the most important part of the life of this nation. And it's that one moment where every South African exercises the same right. Now covering the election is not an editorial preference of the SABC that it may take or it may leave, but it's a public mandate operating at its highest point. Now that mandate, as you rightly pointed out, it's binding by law. And as I indicated, it's unfunded. Now, the SABC is expected to use commercial revenue to fund a public mandate. Now, that is the funding challenge plainly. So the call is very straightforward by the Portfolio Committee. Where state imposes a public mandate, the state must fund what the mandate costs. And this urgency comes from the fact that the date is fixed and the funding still does not exist. That's the problem we have. November 4th is taking place, but the funding of 120 million, that has not been fixed. And this was neither approved in February budget, nor was it recently endorsed by the executive when a request was made for additional funding. The executive cited various regulatory restrictions, and this was heavily contested in Parliament yesterday.
So you sketch out the backdrop quite well, and also in a way talking to the more ongoing and chronic conditions as far as the underfunding and perhaps what's broken with the funding model. But if we confine ourselves to the current ask, you're making a call for urgent funding. Who's that call directed at? I presume it's the executive arm of government, but where specifically? Who should be doing what and within what time frames if this project is to be carried out successfully?
Well, certainly, if the SABC is to fully scale up and fund the local government elections to the extent that it needs to, so that South Africans are fully informed, certainly that 120 million is urgently needed, like yesterday. As I said, it should have been approved in February, but it has not yet been approved. So we're calling both the ministries, the executives from communications and digital technologies, as well as the ministries from finance, as well as the ministries from the presidency, to sit in a room and find a solution, because we believe that this is a matter of national importance. We are just 6 weeks away from the democratic local government elections, which has over 600 political parties taking part. If we do not find a solution to this, it means those who are most vulnerable. When SABC, let me point out, SABC has presented to us, they've indicated they will be able to cover the elections. But naturally, without the suitable funding, they will not be able to cover it to the scale that it would want to, given the fact that there are over 600 parties contesting these elections.
So if we do raise this 120 million rand and we're able to, and someone, the call that you are making is heard and it's responded to in a positive manner, in a way that would amount in a way to sort of stemming the bleeding and perhaps applying plaster. But you and I would agree that the big issue, and it's been for the last few decades, the model itself, and the Minister, Solly Malatsi, starting some work in terms of getting a service provider to work on various models and various other role players to come in and decide which model South Africa will follow for public broadcasting. But what's your sense of the urgency with which that work is being carried out, and are we any closer to actually putting this behind us and saying that we once had an issue about how to fund public broadcasting? That was some years ago. We've dealt with it. We now have a workable and sustainable model. How far is the tunnel and the pipeline?
You know, I can tell you, as I indicated, we only have 55% funding of the public mandate. And unless, as you rightly pointed out, we don't fix up the funding model of the SABC, we are facing a situation. So our hope is, look, the minister was supposed to have come to us with a proposed funding model of how we're going to fix this problem up. He has engaged consultants, as you said. I think it was about 3 months ago, the minister's supposed to come to us. But what I can assure you is that the portfolio committee is on top of this. We are certainly pressing the minister to come before us, propose that model that he has, the consultants would have proposed to him, so that we can find each other and move forward. Because unless and until we do not find a permanent solution to the challenges we face as SABC, the issues of surrounding, you know, the kind of things we'd like to do, very powerful local content, innovation, digitization, all those kind of things that will make you a world-class competitor and player. And indeed you are. I mean, if you look at the local government elections, international stations like BBC, like all of them, they take a feed from you because they depend on the authenticity of the public broadcaster. So as a committee, we certainly are committed to hold Minister Malatsi accountable to come before us and propose the model so we can find a solution.
Lastly, why should South Africans watching us this evening not believe or suspect that is more this is more lip service to these critical issues by yourselves as the ANC caucus, well, the component in that in the portfolio committee, or even at worst, you know, mere politicking, given the dynamics, the tension and friction that we sometimes observe between the committee and the minister?
No, I can assure you this much, that as the ANC caucus of the Portfolio Committee on Communications, this is a clarion and a sincere call. Because if we are unable to ensure that the funds that is required is made available to the SABC, so that it can give coverage to all those 600 political parties, what's going to happen, unfortunately, is you're going to have those political parties who can afford to come and purchase airtime on the SABC, on other platforms. They're going to block book all the airtime. So South Africans would unfortunately be deprived of their opportunity to make an informed decision. And remember, this democracy is strengthened by an informed electorate. A weakened and uninformed electorate does not strengthen democracy.
All right, thank you for your time this evening. That's ANC Caucus Whip in the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies, Imraan Subrathie, Member of Parliament.